Hey everybody, it's Justin Stivers. Thank you guys for tuning in for another episode of the Stivers Show. This is going to be a four-part series, this one that we're doing. Probate is a complicated topic for a lot of people, heck, for a lot of attorneys as well. And so, our goal and kind of like my vision for when I do this is how can we make it as simple as possible? So what can we do to really make the probate process just simple for people in general? And so this podcast, I'm going to try to do, I think, a four-part series talking about the four different stages of probate. And if you guys have a copy of my book here that I wrote, A Loved One Has Died, Now What? I talk about these four stages. If you don't have a copy and you want a copy, we'll send you a copy. Just email me at justin@probatefirm.com and we'll get you a copy of the book either in PDF or hard copy form. But so I'm going to go through the book a little bit, but I want to, this is part one, and I really want to I think one of the most difficult times for people in the probate process is in the very beginning, right? So in the beginning, someone has died, which is obviously difficult. And now that person, the heirs, the beneficiaries, whoever's left, they've got to find an attorney. They've got to go through court. They're probably stuck trying to find out what assets, if any, their family member, their loved ones had. A lot of times people find that their parent did not have their stuff together and it's a mess. And so people are confused in the very beginning. Once they come into our world, once they come into our firm's world, and we take over, there's really little that they have to do. And I always tell my clients and prospective clients, I say, listen, the biggest decision is just hiring our law firm. Once we get going, you can focus on other things. You're not going to have to go to court. You're not going to be trying to learn the law. You're not going to be coming to our office all the time. Like at most, we're going to have you notarize a couple documents in the very beginning. After that, most of the documents that we have our clients sign is done electronically, done from a phone, computer, or something like that. It's extremely simple. But it's the very beginning that people, I think, just feel overwhelmed, which is why sometimes they don't start this process for months, if not years, and a lot can happen. Unfortunately, you can lose a property to foreclosure. It's just so many, there's more likely that someone could do something wrong and steal money or steal jewelry or not take care of a property or, do a bunch of different things. So it's the very beginning. So this four-part series, this first series, I want to focus in on what are the first things that you need to do, right? So I guess, best place to start is probate occurs after somebody has passed away, right? So somebody has died and now you or the family member or the beneficiary has to go through a court process. And at the end of the court process, a judge is going to say who gets what of that person's stuff. So most common example is mom and dad have a piece of real estate, right? So mom and dad have a home. They've lived in there for 30 plus years, and they just have it. They just own it. John and Linda own the house together. John dies. Okay, Linda owns the property. It's her property 100%. Linda dies. Now who owns it? Well, if they didn't do some planning, if they didn't update the title, if they didn't put it in a trust, even if they have a will, having a will does not avoid probate, and that's a topic for another conversation. It's not going to avoid probate. So their kids, John and Linda's kids, are going to have to come to us, the probate law firm, or a probate law firm in general, but the probate law firm to get the property put in their name so that they can sell it. So probate occurs after someone has died. There's a lot of, that's a big distinction. But that's what really triggers this whole thing. And at the end, it's a process where at the end, someone's going to inherit something. Okay. So let's say now you're unfortunately you're experiencing this. You've just lost somebody. You've lost someone close to you. Where do you even start? Right? So I mean that's a start with did they pass away suddenly? Which a lot of times it is. Like maybe they've been sick for a little while, but you didn't expect them to pass away last night or the night before. And what do you do? Where's the funeral? Did they want to be cremated? What were their wishes? Do they live in Florida, but you live in New York? How do you go get the body? I mean, it's a lot of stuff that is, people are not prepared for it. People don't think about. It's easier for the family when people do prepare, but unfortunately, people don't prepare for this because it's not something comfortable to think about. So, one of the first things is you're going to have to figure out the funeral home component of that. Did they pre-plan? Did they have a plot? Did they want to be cremated? And so hopefully they have something down. I feel like that's a lot of times people do kind of, if they're older, right? If you're in your 30s or 40s, you probably haven't thought about it or haven't had the conversation, hey, what's going to happen to me after I die? But, if you're in your 60s, more so probably 70s and 80s, you've thought about it and you've kind of maybe told somebody. So, we don't get too involved in the funeral aspect of it. We do work with a lot of funeral homes and have, good partners at funeral homes and whatnot, but you're probably coming to us after the fact. So step number one is probably you got to figure out, those arrangements. And if you're listening to this and you haven't thought about it, or your parents are still alive and they haven't thought about it, definitely something you want to get squared away. One, from just a purely logistic thing is what are we going to do with you? What are we going to do with you, right? And then also from a finance thing, funerals, I don't want to speak for them, but it seems like they range, between 5,000 to, tens of thousands, depending on what you're going to do. And who's going to pay for that? If mom and dad haven't pre-planned, who's going to pay for that? And that can lead to a lot of fighting amongst families. That's little things like that. Well, I guess that's not necessarily a little thing, but paying for things. I'm thinking of like in my own family where if we're like splitting a gift for somebody, for a parent, and there can be sibling fighting as to how much the gift is, who didn't put in, who's going to put in more, whatever. So imagine, something more serious where we're talking about someone's burial and all of that. So the better that's planned for, 100%, that's just going to leave everyone in a much better situation. So you got to plan for it. And now we got to pay for it. One of the things that they're going to ask you, the funeral home director, if it's at a funeral home, or even maybe the physician, or the hospital, or if you're at hospice, or something along those lines, to order death certificates. Okay. And most, if I wasn't in this business, I wouldn't know, but Florida there's two types of death certificate. There's a long form, which means it has the cause of death on it. And there's a short form, which means it doesn't have the cause of death on it. When we file a probate, we have to have the short form, meaning it doesn't have the cause of death. We have to have the original. We can't have a copy of it. And we're going to have to send it to the courthouse and they keep it. So I'd probably say, and they'll probably recommend this to you as well, but you want to probably request, 5 copies of each, if possible, 5 copies of the long form and 5 copies of the short form. The reason is, depending on what they had, different institutions may still require the long or the short form. For example, if you've got a life insurance policy, they're probably going to request original copy of the long form with the cause of death on there, because a lot of life insurance companies have restriction policies for suicide, for example. And so they want to see what the cause of death was to know if they're going to try to fight you on the payout or something. So requesting the death certificates here in Florida, I'm going to say, get 5 of each, the short form and the long form. If you're in another state, which we work with a lot of out-of-state people, get. I can't speak to every state, but get a couple copies. I don't know if they have a short form, their version of a short form, or a long form, but you're going to want to find, get a couple of copies because we're going to need the originals. All right. Now we've got, so now that's the most fundamental thing. Now we want to make sure that we protect those assets. We want to make sure that we're protecting whatever your loved one had. And I'll talk about real estate because, again, real estate is probably the most common thing. So a lot of properties, when someone dies, they still have a mortgage on it, or they took out a home equity line of credit, or they have what's called a reverse mortgage, meaning that the person living in it was getting paid to live there, and then when they pass, the lender forecloses on the property to get their money back. Reverse mortgages are tricky, so I'm gonna leave those out for this conversation. But for a home equity line of credit or for a mortgage, they will not stop the foreclosure if you say my mom and dad passed away. Unfortunately, that doesn't matter. They're going to want their monthly payments. Now, they may tell you, I'm sorry for your loss. We'll give you a month or two. Whether or not that person you're talking to actually has the authority to do that, I somewhat doubt. And they may not start the foreclosure the next month because, in all honesty, a lot of these banks have so many foreclosures that they just can't get to them. And so it may even be a couple of weeks, months before they even start the foreclosure process. But if you're able, okay, and you're wanting to keep the property, I generally suggest keep paying the mortgage if you're able. And again, if the property is worthless or not in good condition and it's so far behind on payments, it's already in foreclosure, you don't think it's worth trying to save it, obviously I wouldn't tell you to keep paying it. But if it's a property where you think there's equity in it and you think that it might be worth saving, or you think obviously if you want to live in it and keep it, try to make those payments, not just because we don't want to, obviously the main risk is we don't want the property to go to foreclosure, but we don't want that once it's in foreclosure, now we've got interest that's accruing. We've got attorney's fees that are accruing from the bank's attorneys. So lenders, mortgages, home equity lines, let's try to keep making payments if we can. In Florida, we've got a lot of what are called homeowners associations. So you live in a townhouse, you live in a condo, or even some houses, communities where you pay a monthly fee for some of the common areas or to maintain the property or something like that. Those associations will foreclose on you if you miss one payment. They are ruthless. Whereas with a mortgage, I might say, listen, if you don't have the $800 a month, $1,500 a month to pay the mortgage, if we get started now, we're probably fine. Worst case scenario, we can defend the foreclosure. And I know that it takes banks years to foreclose, so I'm not worried about that. The association, on the other hand, we need to pay them because they don't mess around. They will, if you miss one payment, certainly if you miss 2 payments, you're going to get a letter in the mail and they're going to start the foreclosure process. And the fact that mom or dad passed away and that they were great tenants and they lived there, great owners, they lived there 50 years, never missed a payment in their life, those people don't care. So that one, the association dues, I want to make sure that you're paying. The other assets that you're probably going to come across are banks, bank accounts, investment accounts, financial accounts. So mom and dad had a bank account, a checking account, and a savings account at Chase Bank. it was in their names only. Now that they've passed away, you can't access that money, and we've got to go through probate in order to access it. Sometimes they have they name beneficiaries on those accounts. So they might have named you as a beneficiary, or your sister or your sibling, or they had a trust and the trust was the beneficiary. In those cases where you're named as a beneficiary, or if you're a joint owner, if mom put you on there because she wanted you to have access to her money and you wanted to have access to help her out and pay for bills and stuff, you don't need me. You don't need an attorney. You can go right into the bank. They're probably going to ask for your, identification, a copy of the death certificate, if you're a joint owner. But if you're a beneficiary, they're going to ask for a copy of the death certificate, and they're going to have you fill out forms, and you can withdraw that money right then and there. So if you're a beneficiary on any account, on a investment account, excuse me, that you've got with Fidelity or Schwab or Morgan Stanley, wherever, if you're named as a beneficiary, you can go in there and access that money, today. If you're a joint account owner, similarly, you can go in there, you can access that money, and you don't need an attorney to go in there and do that. You can just go in there. We don't need to go through the probate process. You don't need anything from the court. That's your money right now. You can go in and get it. If you're not the beneficiary, if you're not a joint account owner, we're going to have to access that money through probate. So what I suggest is, this is a tricky situation, and here's why. If you go and tell the bank that mom passed away, they're going to freeze that account, meaning you're not going to be able to, any payments that were going to be received if she was getting like a pension are going to be frozen, and they're probably not going to accept that money anymore. Also, any automatic payments that were being made from that account are going to be frozen, which could be good and could be bad. If mom has money in that account and she had automatic withdrawal for her mortgage payment, well, we may not want to notify Chase necessarily that she died, because we need that money to be used to keep paying that mortgage if you don't have it. However, if she also had automatic withdrawal to pay her credit card bills, we don't really want to pay the credit card bills, which I'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. So it's almost a case. And the other main thing is, I'm concerned sometimes to have an account open when someone's passed away, and if somebody's got, a debit card of mom or dad's, a sibling or whatever, and they know she's passed, well, maybe they just go start withdrawing money, which I've seen happen. So I tend to say we want to notify the bank so that they freeze the account, because in all honesty, it's harder to, if not impossible, to get that money back once it's gone. So if we freeze those accounts, generally, that's generally my recommendation. Same with investment accounts. We're going to notify the broker, the advisor, or wherever they had the money, that she's passed, to stop any trading, and they've got internal rules and stuff like that. So I generally want to notify. I generally want to notify the banks. So the other one that we get a lot of questions about are cars, motorcycles, even mobile homes, motor vehicles. These things are not probate assets. And what I mean by that is, generally, I don't need to go to court and ask that Honda transfer the car into your name. The local DMV has a form that you can fill out there. So what I generally advise my clients is, take a copy of your driver's license, take a copy of the death certificate, take a copy of the title, and you can go, and there's usually a couple forms that you can fill out, and they'll transfer title to your name right then and there. Now, the one caveat to that is, sometimes you might not be able to find the title. If you can't find the title, we may have to go to court in order to get the title transferred to your name. If you can't find the title, we might have to go to court for that. And that's going to be a part of the process, and that's going to take, some time. That's generally my recommendations when it comes to the car. The other big ticket items, that we're probably going to need to secure, again, with the house, we want to make sure it's taken care of. We want to make sure that that rent payment, if it's a rental property, it's getting received. Don't cash that money, or put it, if you need to, before we get going. Let's put it into an account, to the attorney's trust account. Make sure the house is secure, though. Is it in a bad area, or is it in a good area, but you just don't want to leave, it vacant? And this, again, there are some rules and some things you need to know, which is why I can't, tell you everything you need to do right now and here. But, contact us, 305-456-3255 or www.probatefirm.com, and reach out and we can give you some information. But you want to make sure that house is secure. One of the things that people fight the most over are like the knickknacks, the photo albums, and even, obviously expensive jewelry, furniture. That stuff we need to document as soon as possible. Because again, if sister or cousin or whoever comes in and takes a bunch of stuff, and 9 months later we're in court, it becomes more difficult to prove that stuff even existed, and sister or cousin might have sold it, and now how are we going to get that back, right? So what I generally recommend is, as soon as we can, let's take pictures and let's do what's called an inventory. There's professional companies where you can do this yourself, but document as much as you can. I want to have photographs of expensive stuff, really of anything. Take videos, even videos are great. It's just about documenting everything, right? If we're concerned that some of these stuff might be stolen, or you don't want the liability, maybe it makes sense to get a storage unit and put the stuff in a storage unit, just safekeeping. But again, these are all, it depends on the situation. If it's, just a bunch of, mom's stuff that she had and no one really wants it, well, I'm not as concerned about it. I still want to document it. But again, we just want to make sure we've got everything documented, so that if and when a fight does arise, you're protected, and from either being accused of something and from someone else trying to steal something. So the main thing with assets, with anything, is it does require a little bit of strategy, but we want to make sure everything's protected. I want to talk for a second now about creditors. So a lot of times you're going to have mom and dad or whoever passes away probably had credit card bills that have not gotten paid. That's one of the most common, or hospital bills. And so credit cards, you're likely not on the account. If you're not on the credit card with mom or dad, don't pay. You're not responsible. That's why, again, and that's some strategy, is how we can get that credit card bill reduced or completely removed in the probate court. So don't pay it. Don't come out of pocket and pay it. That's generally, what I would advise if we were speaking. I'd want to speak with you first before saying that, but that's generally what we do, is we say don't pay it. Which is why we want to probably notify the banks to freeze the account, so that Visa and American Express can't just continue getting that automatic withdrawal, and you're not going to get your payment. Hospital bills are probably the second biggest one. Okay. And even if you think mom had Medicare, Medicaid, insurance, whatever, there's probably some sort of bill, especially if they were there for if they were in the hospital for an extended amount of time, that's going to come up. Again, same. My advice is probably going to be the same, unless you are somehow a joint account owner, which you're probably not. But if you're somehow a joint account owner on these hospital bills or whatnot, do not come out of pocket for that. There's a procedure. We object to it, and hospitals may get something, but just you don't need to come out of pocket from that in the beginning. So that's why you want to get into with an attorney first, so he or she can so we can kind of point that out for you and give you the right steps on that. But as a general rule of thumb, you're not going to want to pay. So we talked a little bit about assets. We talked a little bit about creditors. I guess two other things that I want to talk about in these beginning stages. So we haven't even started a probate yet. You haven't hired your attorney yet. You were just doing things to make sure everything's done correctly. I want you to look for important documents, legal documents, and the mail. Okay. Legal documents, we want to find, did mom and dad do a will? Did they have a trust? Did they have, a safety deposit box that we're going to need to get access to? What did they have? Where's their stuff? And we want to secure that. I want you to get the mail if possible, because the mail a lot of times gives us clues. So I can't tell you how many times I get a call from a potential client, and they'll tell me, listen, my mom passed away. I think she had some money in some bank accounts. I'm just not sure where. Well, there's not really a master database that I or any attorney can go to necessarily and search by somebody's name or their social and find out if they had money at, the local credit union. The way we're going to know that is really is by bank statements, or she tells you, or you're on the account, or we have to kind of follow the breadcrumbs to figure that out. So the mail is usually a good place to start. Usually bank statements are coming there, mortgage statements are coming there, and other important pieces of mail. So that's where I usually tell my clients to start. Hey, listen, let's start getting the mail, figure out what they have, and then we can put together the pieces as to where we're going to go next. So I want you to gather those important documents. If there is a will, we're going to need the original. Copy is likely not good enough, so we're going to want the original. So start gathering all that information. You don't have to, one thing I've had clients, they feel like they need to have everything together, like for the past 50 years, every bank statement they've ever had and all that. You don't need that, okay? We're gonna walk you through the process, but the more information you have, the better. But I don't want you to feel overwhelmed that, the mom was a hoarder and has a house filled with shoe boxes of documents, which I've seen. We don't want to wait till you've scanned everything and researched every little thing. But we do want to have like some sort of idea of what the picture looks like. That can kind of start us down the path of putting everything together. And the last thing I want to talk about is probably one of the most important things, and that's keeping the peace. Now, in my years of doing this, I've noticed that a lot of siblings, especially brothers and sisters, or sisters and sisters, brothers, but siblings, as the years go by, they tend to drift apart. There's usually one sibling who, didn't treat the family well, one sibling who stayed close by. Some siblings got along, didn't get along, one took money, mom and dad paid more for one than the other, or whatever the case may be. And so there's a lot of resentment there. And now sometimes when mom and dad have died, one of the kids thinks that, this is the big payday, or they want more than their fair share, or they want their fair share, but the other sibling doesn't think they're entitled to a fair share because they hadn't been around in the past 30 years. I am generally of the opinion that it's better to go into these situations with, your fists down, not swinging out of the gates. Now, there's exception to that. Sometimes it's so far gone, and there's it's going to be a battle that you have to come in, aggressive and whatnot. But I generally have had more success when our side comes in peacefully and we're able to kind of work things out. So, I don't necessarily, sometimes as siblings, it's a joint decision on whether to hire an attorney or who's going to hire the attorney or not. And that's, a decision for you all to make. If you all are not on great terms, I have found that, just getting a letter from an attorney saying, hey, your sister hired us is not great because they feel a little bit blindsided. So I like families that, can kind of work together, make a joint decision. Or, sometimes it's hard to make a joint decision, but at least let everybody kind of know what's going on. I like transparency. I think it tends to work out a little bit better. So, part of the, one of the hardest parts of this entire process is managing family relationships, right? I think that's probably, if not the hardest, one of the hardest parts of all of this, because emotions are high. You probably still haven't even had a chance to grieve, and you're trying to, sell a family home that everyone grew up in. You're trying to, get the family back together after 30 years, and brother doesn't have money to pay for the funeral. He can't chip in, sister, pay for the whole thing or whatever it is. And so trying to manage those relationships can be very difficult. So I like to work with my clients and say, once I kind of hear the story, hear the dynamics, say, okay, listen, this is how I think we should approach them. This is kind of the play. This is what I think we need to do. But managing those relationships is definitely, a big component of this. So it's a lot. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of stuff that you do need to do. Before we're not even to what I call phase 2 of actually filing the paperwork and getting this started. A lot of this is just like laying the groundwork, getting everything ready. I know from experience, most of our clients probably hire us a couple months after the loss of a loved one. It's usually a couple months. I like to see, if we can get started in about a month after the person passed away. It just, again, there's less potential for money being stolen or lost, foreclosures. Again, we want to get in and out so that you all can continue with your life, right? You don't want to be doing this for as, you want to do this as short as possible. So the sooner we can get in it, the better. So I would say, probably about a month after a person passing is probably the ideal amount of time, maybe a little bit sooner, but, again, it's a process. So you don't want to rush it necessarily because you are grieving and you're going to continue to grieve for many, many years to come, most likely. But we want to get started, a little bit sooner than later. So anyways, that's part 1. We're going to do, part 2, once we actually get the case filed, what that looks like. Right now we're just teeing it up so that, these are kind of the things, you need to do. So to recap, we're going to order some death certificates. In Florida, we need the short form. We want to secure the assets. We're probably going to notify the banks that someone's passed away. We're probably going to try to keep paying the mortgage, but more importantly, we're going to try to keep paying the association. We know that they're not going to stop the foreclosure just because, they passed away. Unfortunately, we want to try to keep the peace. We want to locate important documents, and we want to be proactive and try to get started as soon as we can. So I'm here to help. My office, the Probate Law Firm, probatefirm.com. Reach out. You can reach out to me personally, Justin@probatefirm.com. Happy to help. Provide you, again, copy of my book, A Loved One Has Died, Now What? If you want a copy of that to learn, go a little bit more in depth on some of these things in a very simple, easy to read, user-friendly type way. And hope you guys found that useful, and we'll talk to you soon.